King of the Hill is often recognized as one of the greatest adult family animated shows of all time, and certainly one with the most heart. Known for its realistic approach to comedy, the stories are derived mainly from typical circumstances of everyday life, as opposed to unnatural, forced, and over-the-top situations. Its groundedness, as well as its at times dry sense of humor, is what separates it from other animated comedies. As you can tell by some of our previous videos, we're huge King of the Hill fans, so it's only fitting that we break down some of our favorite episodes. I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and these are what we consider to be the top 10 best King of the Hill episodes of all time.
Why are you in your underwear?
Number 10, Hanky Panky. We start off our countdown with Hanky Panky, an episode which premiered in Season 4 of the series' remarkable 13-season lifespan. In a nutshell, this episode deals with Hank's recent acquisition of Sugarfoot's Barbecue from Buck Strickland.
Son, you just bought yourself a barbecue joint.
Buck is going through a divorce, and because Texas is a community property state, he decides to bequeath the property to Hank, who gladly accepts it. Of course, the episode isn't without its fair share of drama. Ms. Liz, Buck's wife, bursts in on a meeting with Buck, Hank, and others to publicly announce Buck's infidelity. Not to mention Debbie's attempt to sexually seduce Hank so that he can provide her with protection from Buck's wife. Debbie, of course, is Buck's mistress. Watching Debbie try to seduce Hank is possibly one of the funniest Hank Hill awkward moments.
Nobody rejects Debbie Grund!
Well, I just did.
And this episode puts Hank right in the middle of some of the biggest drama that's happened on the show. Number 9. Hank and the Great Glass Elevator. Speaking of drama, what's more dramatic than awkward Hank Hill getting over his fear and revealing his butt cheeks to a crowded hotel lobby? Given the reserved nature of his character, this setup is the recipe for perfect comedy. Hank accompanies his buddies on Bill's birthday trip, and everyone seems to think that Hank is a little bit uptight, which really bothers Hank. And to prove to his friends that he can cut loose too,
I'm doing it. I'm a mooner.
Hank ends up mooning Ann Richards, albeit by accident, the former Texas governor. In a weird twist of fate, because of Hank's actions, Bill ends up taking an interest in Ann, leading them to have a tense romantic relationship.
Ann, you're the best thing to happen to my life since Lenore ruined it.
Shadowed by Bill's ex-wife's sudden interest in her former husband. Needless to say, Bill's love life ends up being a huge mess. It's another episode with a lot of drama, a well-written plot, and some unusually over-the-top comedy. And it's also one of the many episodes where we legitimately feel sorry for Bill. Number 8, Jumpin' Crack Bass. Due to the fact that King of the Hill has had 13 seasons, there have been so many changes to the series that it's difficult to keep count. But one of the main things that really stays consistent throughout the series is Hank Hill's, at times, uptight commitment to his moral code. In many ways, this is what makes him such a great character, and it contributes to both his honor and his ignorance. He's a man of principle who would never compromise his values. At the end of the day, one thing never changes. Hank is someone who follows his traditions religiously.
And it all starts with a hand-dug American worm.
As a fisherman, Hank usually fishes with a worm which he digs out of the ground by hand. In Jumpin' Crack Bass, Hank breaks his tradition and ends up using cocaine as bait instead of the typical worm. How does this happen? Hank's overwhelming lack of awareness in new environments has him confuse a crack dealer with the guy who sells fishing bait out of his truck.
But Ray was telling me about your bait and...
Bait. You call it bait. I like that way you look, Miss Band.
As expected, police arrest him and he's brought to court to plead his case to a judge. The judge agrees to pardon both Hank and his friend Dale of their crimes if Hank is able to catch a fish with crack cocaine as bait. In a twist of fate, just when he was about to give up, Hank snags a bite. This episode is often considered one of the series' best because it offers a clear-cut presentation of Hank's character. On one hand, Hank is extremely high-strung when it comes to morality, yet on the other hand, he's naive about the world and the dangers that lurk in the shadows. And it goes without saying that having Hank Hill accidentally buy crack to go fishing with is absolutely flawless comedy writing. Number 7, I'll Sew. Isle So was an episode which aired in Season 4 King of the Hill, and boy oh boy did it have the critics raving. Being one of the few episodes that really surrounds Connie, it definitely stands out. Essentially, Hank's neighbors, Con and Min, have gone to Hawaii on a business trip.
Shocking! You hillbillies chew on that while I'm jetting off to Hawaii for biggest computer convention there is, Systems Expo Maui, in Hawaii.
Recognizing that their young adolescent daughter Connie requires supervision, they leave her in the care of trusted Hank to handle any issues Connie may have. Well, Hank may have thought that he was prepared for the worst, but when Connie gets her first period under his watch,
Mr. Hill, I just got my first period.
he realized that he forgot to do his homework. The episode explores a clueless Hank's and a distressed Connie's attempt to figure out how to deal with Connie's period. This episode was a real critic pleaser, not only because of how it addressed the coming-of-age moment in a young girl's life, but also because it teaches parents to be cognizant of certain problems affecting their child's lives. And of course, it's another great example of a situation that our awkward Hank Hill is just not prepared for. Number 6. Oh yeah. As expected for subject matter like this, the directors of King of the Hill decided to pull out everything for Oh yeah. After all, Snoop Dogg made an appearance in this episode, so what more could you want?
Marrying one of his hoes.
The episode centers around Tammy, one of Hank's new coworkers.
That new gal Buck hired? Well, long story short, she's dumb as a charcoal briquette.
To say that Tammy wasn't exactly the brightest bulb in the box would be a bit of a modest statement to say the least. To help Tammy out, Peggy offers her to stay at the house until she gets her GED. Despite being a bit ditzy, Tammy does leave a good impression on Hank and Peggy, especially because they love the clothes which she buys for the couple.
I kinda like it.
But what it took them both way too long to figure out was that when they invited Tammy into their home, they invited an A-class hooker. And with the new hat that Tammy gifted Hank, along with his dad's Cadillac, it isn't long before Hank is confused for Tammy's pimp.
You mess with her, you mess with me. Now hand over the money.
And really, watching Hank Hill unknowingly transform into the Mac Daddy of Arlen is just one of the funniest things ever.
I am the Mac Daddy of Heimlich County. I play it straight up, yo.
Number 5. Mutual of Amambois. A countdown of the best King of the Hill episodes wouldn't be complete if we didn't mention this episode. A plot that really throws the Hill family into chaos. The synopsis goes as follows. It slips Hank's mind to mail out his insurance payment, and as a result of his negligence, his policy lapses for 36 hours, meaning that if any major disaster were to happen to the home within that time period, the entire family would essentially be screwed. The episode explores the family's frantic attempts to secure the house from any possible damage and disaster during those 36 hours. Number 4. Suge Knight. If we were counting down episodes with the weirdest plots, Suge Knight would probably top the list. With Hank Hill's awkwardness towards sex and really anything that isn't family friendly, it's always especially hilarious when he's confronted with something a bit more risque. And in this episode, Hank ends up in a very strange situation. He has an erotic dream involving Nancy.
You know, I had the craziest dream last night.
In the dream, he's making burgers on the grill, and out of nowhere, he sees Nancy naked. Unable to grapple with the belief that he had such a sexual dream about Nancy, Hank is bothered to the core about it. He tries to talk it out with some of his friends, not Peggy of course, but to no avail.
Yeah, John Redcorn, I had a dream last night. You got a minute?
Peggy, being the narcissist that she is, obviously immediately assumes that the dream was about her. But upon Hank's introspection, Hank determines that the dream was more about grilling than it was about nudity. Which I guess says a lot about Hank, but then again, knowing his character, it's not all that surprising. It's one of the more bizarre, yet still hilarious episodes.
Charles Emerson Wagner built his first grill out of chain link fence in an old wash tub.
Number 3. Megalodale. Moving into the top 3, we have Megalodale, an episode which first aired in 2003 in the show's 7th season. The main issue in this episode has to do with the Megalomart. Unfortunately, the Mart has a bit of a pest problem.
Dang it. Just between you and me, we got a little rat infestation here. Hank, you're tapped in.
Upon the manager's request, Hank is asked to recommend an exterminator to come resolve the problem. Although he wasn't confident in his friend Dale's ability to complete the job successfully, knowing that he needed the extra income, Hank opted to recommend him. As the episode progresses, Dale fears that the real problem might not be a rat infestation, but rather the work of Chuck Mangione. It's one of the best episodes that really explores the conspiratorial nature of Dale's character, and particularly funny because it ends up being true. Of course, not wanting to risk hurting Hank's reputation, Hank and Dale have no choice but to deal with the matter in the best way that they can. Apart from having a really well executed and hilarious plot, this episode is also special because it's only the second one to feature a digital animation. The first one being Bobby Goes Nuts. Speaking of which, number 2, Bobby Goes Nuts. Bobby Goes Nuts is a true gem and a staple of the entire series, and is honestly a brilliant episode. Obviously for the comedy, but it also pits two of the most important characters in the show in a way that really highlights their conflicting character. It's also given us a line that every King of the Hill fan has repeated over and over again.
That's my purse! I don't know you!
The plot of the episode revolves around Bobby. After he was invited to Connie's slumber party, he ends up being forced to eat dirt by Shane Wasana-san.
If you eat some dirt, then maybe I'll leave you alone.
Which of course leads Hank to encourage Bobby to register for boxing classes at a local academy. As his training progresses, Bobby becomes a great fighter, learning all the tricks and trades of self-defense. The problem is that Bobby signed up for the women's self-defense training program, so all of his self-defense tactics relate to kicking a man in the balls. We think you know where this is going. As mentioned previously, Bobby Goes Nuts is an episode which is well deserving of being one of the best episodes of the series. Its ridiculousness, as well as its pitting of Bobby's feminine defense techniques against Hank, which really reflects their characters so perfectly, is really just the ideal plot for the two most important characters on the show. Number 1. Returning Japanese. One of the most popular and celebrated episodes of the entire series, Returning Japanese has topped our list of the best King of the Hill episodes. Whether you agree or not, you can't take away from the fact that the content and cultural significance of this episode is truly magnificent. Returning Japanese explores Hank's father's bloody past. It's well known that Cotton Hill was a war hero with a high body count during World War II, mainly because he won't stop talking about it. But to know that he found love during his time in Japan was a huge secret.
I left more than my shins in Japan. I left a little piece of my heart.
In a quest to find the woman that he once loved while he was stationed in the country, Hank's dad, along with his family, visit Japan. But Cotton ends up finding out that he's fathered a child about whom he had no prior knowledge. This episode deserves to be number 1 for so many reasons. Firstly, the complexities and subtle criticisms it makes of war aren't only evident, but also relevant in real life. But King of the Hill's subtle yet brilliant writing doesn't make it the focal point of the episode. And in many ways, the episode actually explores the importance of family and love, and just how important it is, which is really surprising coming from a character like Cotton Hill.
And he also taught me there is no shame in having a narrow urethra.
Really, this episode offers a lot of important, valuable life lessons. And the concept of there being a Japanese version of Hank Hill somewhere in Tokyo, well, that just makes me happy. I would also go as far as to say that this episode belongs in a top 10 animes of all time list. So let us know, what was your favorite episode of King of the Hill? Did it make our list? If it didn't, well, we do apologize, I tell you what. The truth is, just about every episode of King of the Hill is a gem, so it's really difficult to narrow it down to 10. But if you enjoyed watching, please remember to like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. But most importantly, stay wicked.